Now, welcome to Today's Business with Sharon Hill on News Talk 1360 WCHL.
Thank you for tuning in today. My guest today is Mr. Dave Kuway, also known as Hawaiian Dave. Dave is the owner of Triangle Estate Planners. Dave, well, thank you for coming to speak to us today.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Sharon.
My pleasure. Let's jump right in. Triangle Estate Planners. Hawaiian Dave, what is Triangle Estate Planners? Why don't you tell our audience?
Well, Sharon, what we do is we help folks properly plan their estate so that they can avoid unnecessary taxation, maximize return in their investments, and minimize legal costs to their heirs.
Well, let's just jump right into estate planning, Dave. What is estate planning, and why is it important?
Well, estate planning basically is divided into three different stages, Sharon. The first stage is wealth creation and accumulation. That's where most of us are in our working years, and we're basically developing or growing an estate. The second stage is called wealth conservation and preservation, and that is when we are getting ready to retire. We want to conserve as much of our estate as possible. We want to minimize taxation. We want to preserve it to be able to pass on to our heirs. And then the third stage is wealth distribution, and that is basically making sure that we set up our estate so that we can pass on as much as possible to our heirs with minimizing legal costs and taxation.
Got it. Who really needs to do estate planning, Dave?
Let me just give you a few examples, Sharon. I had a lady who came to me one day that she had a situation where her husband had a business for about 20 years, and what she basically did is they went into a probate situation where they had to probate the estate, and this business, she was short of cash, so she went to the courts and asked for some extra money to get her by until the probate was finished. Well, one of her husband's competitors came to her and offered her 50% of the value of the business because he had been down to the courts and was able to see the records that she had asked for this allotment, this allowance, and he could see that she was cash flow. She needed cash flow, and so he was basically, courtesy of our court system, he was able to get a head up on the competition and be able to offer her much less what the business was worth. And that's a situation where because of the legal system, she missed out on what she actually could have had for the business. I had another situation where this lady came to me, and her husband had passed away, and she had heard that in a probate situation, a house basically can go into probate, and they has to end up having to pay a lot in extra taxes, capital gain taxes, things like that. So an attorney had recommended to her to put her child on, her adult child on the title with her, and so she went ahead and did that. Well, several years later, her adult sons and his wife basically had a falling out, and they separated, legally separated, and so it was determined that she would sell her house, get a small apartment, and move in with her son. And when it came down to actually trying to close on the house, they found out that since her son's wife, who they were still married, had legal title to her property because it was in her son's name, they could not sell the house unless they got a signature by the wife. And so it ended up basically they had to have the lady sign off, and of course they had to pay her in order to get her own house back. And so these little things, and then there's stories like that all the time where folks haven't done the proper planning, and they end up having to spend a lot in taxation and legal fees.
You use the term probate. I imagine 95% of our audience knows what probate is, but tell us what probate means.
Well, probate is nothing more than the actual process of proving a will to make sure that the will that you have left, if for first and foremost, if you've actually left a will, is the valid will, and the overall process of making sure that that all the assets you have to pass on to your heirs have legal title, they are clear from any encumbrances, and all the debts are paid. And that is basically the process of probate, plus all the taxes are paid as well.
Thank you. Well, what are some of the basic legal documents people should look at? It sounds like if they don't know what their rights are or what's in that paperwork, they can be in big trouble and lose money.
Absolutely. Of course, a will is the very first document that folks look at, and the will, again, tells the courts your wishes in the distribution of your estate. Now, if you don't have a will, Sharon, in every state of the United States, there actually is a will written for folks who die without a written will, and that's called dying intestate. The problem with that is that the will for your state may not necessarily distribute your estate the way that you would like it distributed. And so if you want your wishes to be handled in the court system, you have to have a will. So that's the first document. The second is something called a durable power of attorney, and that allows a person to transact affairs in the event of your incapacitation, either mentally or physically. A living will, a lot of folks have heard about those with the Shivo case down in Florida. That basically tells the medical profession to know your wishes in the event of your inability to communicate, what you have done or what you would have done in the event of your incapacitation or if you are on life support. And then, of course, the last one is the power of attorney for health care or health care directives, and that tells the medical community who you authorize to make those critical decisions in the event of your health care needs and you're not able to tell it yourself.
That's a lot of legal documents.
It is. It is. It
Right.
is.
Well, shouldn't everybody have a lawyer to also make sure those forms are in place?
Absolutely. All these documents basically have to be drafted by legal counsel. Of course, there are programs like LegalZoom.com and other types of situations like that. In the state of North Carolina, a firm can actually draw up documents provided that they are supervised by legal counsel. So, for example, that's what my company does. We can draw up these documents under the supervision of a legal counsel and still be valid.
Understand. Dave, you deal with the estate taxes. What are the rules concerning estate taxes?
Well, as we're speaking today, you're allowed to be able to pass $5 million per spouse to others free of any additional estate taxes. After that, basically the estate tax begins about 55% of your estate.
55% of your estate. After the tax is in effect, you said it begins at about 55% of your estate.
Yeah.
Okay, understand that. So what is the amount I can give to persons each year?
Well, technically, you can give any amount you wish, whether you have to file a report showing the amount that you gift above the yearly excludable amount of $13,000 per person has to be determined, and any amount above that $13,000 will eat into that $5 million that I just referenced. Then anything above the $5 million will be subject to a gift tax that has to be paid by the giver. The recipient doesn't pay the gift tax.
You know, when I hear you talk about this, sometimes my head wants to explode because all this legal stuff is so critical, and yet it sounds so confusing.
It can be very confusing, Sharon.
How do you manage to stay on top of all this, Dave?
I've been in the business for 31 years, and it's what I do.
And that's what you do. So
Yeah.
It sounds like you have a passion for it. You must really love it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I've heard that some wealthy folks are not paying any estate taxes when their spouses die. How do they do that?
You're allowed to pass an unlimited amount to your spouse at the first death through something called an unlimited marital deduction. And where they really get you, Sharon, is at the second death. The IRS simply would rather have you pass everything to your surviving spouse so that the estate is larger and they can claim a larger amount on the estate tax. When you use the unlimited marital deduction exemption, you're in effect throwing away one of your two $5 million unified credit exemptions. So your estate is worth more than, if your estate is worth more than the $5 million, the rates will start about 55% on each dollar above that. So, for example, on a $10 million estate, you'd have to pay about $2,750,000 in estate taxes that you wouldn't normally have to pay if you properly planned by using both unified credit exemptions.
And I imagine your company is somebody who can help people understand this and work through it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Dave, let's take a short break, and when we come back, let's hear more about what you do with estate planning and why this is so critical. You're listening to WCHL 1360, Today's Business. My guest today is Mr. Dave Kuway. We call him Hawaiian Dave. Please stand by.